many other themes, of course.
Now, Dr. Ahmed, you did say that Faiz Ahmad Faiz was involved. Now, many people would argue that, in fact, his poetry selection for the documentary was, in fact, too one-sided, that it presented a distorted image of Iqbal's work, that it was all too one-sided.
I won't use the word distorted, because this is authentic Iqbal. The voice you hear is Iqbal. And, of course, Iqbal is a very revolutionary poet, and his message is of revolution, of change. But I would say that, yes, there has been this perspective which has been selected, and of course it's been presented by Faiz, and he's entitled to make his own selection.
Why was it banned, Dr. Durrani?
Yes, well, I think it was banned because, as you were saying, that the country was in the throes of a dictatorship, and although I think personally that Ayub Khan was probably a benevolent dictator, nevertheless the whole message was come and throw the yokes and break the shackles and rise and revolutionize. And this is part of Iqbal's message. And as Akbar is saying, he was actually a very multi-dimensional man, and in some ways he was contradictory even. But he has many themes, Shahnaz, as you know. He was also a deeply religious person, which of course this film doesn't bring out at all. He is always talking of co-partnership with God. He says that man is almost equal to God. What God has created, man will continue. And he says, you created the garden and I put the flowers into it, and you graved the earth and I made a bowl out of it. So these themes are, of course, not brought out.
Are we saying then that he's sort of a product of his time? The fact that he's writing in the way that he does against oppression, against colonialism, asking the poor to rise, is that a product of that time?
Yes, I think he was very conscious of, there are many poems about the Bolshevik revolution, as he calls it. There is Lenin in the presence of God, and there is the famous lines, "Utho meri duniya ke gharibon ko jaga do, kaakhe umra ke daro diwar hila do." Rise, O poor of the world, and shake the walls and the doors of the palaces of the rich. And this didn't go down well. But there were other aspects, and it appears to me, you know, the famous fable that 6 blind men are looking at an elephant, and one says, oh, I think it's a rope. The other says, no, I think it's a big tower, and so on. So you could say Iqbal is many things to many people. And Faiz, he had the editorial freedom. He chose one aspect.
I think that's a fair enough comment on any great poet, that he gives you so much food for thought, so many images, such richness that a person can interpret him according to his own light. I think that on the one hand, he specifically takes an anti-colonial, anti-imperialist stance. That's the period in which he's living. Those are the great ideas in the world then. But at the same time, there's a timelessness about Iqbal. Love, pain, joy, the emotions you and I might feel, the cry against tyranny, against oppression, the voice in the wilderness, all these are reflected in him. That is why he's so relevant and so fresh to us today, after the post-colonial situation.
Let me pick up on one of the themes that you mentioned, love.
Yes.
Was he romantic? I mean...
Well, he was... I mean, love is on many levels, of course. I think the love that Akbar Ahmed is talking about, Iqbal consistently uses the word love, and there he is bringing up ishq as an antithesis or the opposite of intellect. There's intellect which tells you do this and do that and be careful and don't do that. There's ishq, the abandonment, the madness, the revolutionary zeal, do it and forget about the results, and you will succeed. But he also, in real life, he did believe in romance. There are very tender poems. In fact, in my book, which is called Iqbal in Europe, I have 27 letters he wrote to his German teacher in Heidelberg.
Was this a mistress?
No, I think he had very tender feelings for her, Emma Wegenas, and he writes to her as a man would write to somebody for whom he cares. And I think one should not deify Iqbal and say that he only talked of spiritual love. He also, a real human being, also talks about love of this life, in this life.
Dr. Ahmed, just a sort of interesting point is that Iqbal, like his predecessor Omar Khayyam in a way, they write extensively about women and wine. How does that image sort of fit in with Islam?
Well, I think the answer is on 2 levels. One, of course, that most poets would be writing about women, about relationships, about human relationships in particular. On another level, of course, many of the Sufi poets interpret love and ishq and the imagery of wine and women on a very sophisticated plane.
How relevant is he today in the light of the recent furore over Salman Rushdie, would you say?
To understand Iqbal, his ideas and his work, you must understand him as a synthesis between two opposed positions, modernity and tradition. Modernity in Iqbal's knowledge of contact with the great minds of the contemporary world, and tradition in his reflecting the great Muslim saints, the Persian mystics, and of course his greatest heroes like Jalaluddin Rumi and the Holy Prophet of Islam. So he's a synthesis, his work is a synthesis.
Dr. Durrani?
Yes, I think that's absolutely right. He was, of course, deeply religious, as Akbar says, but at the same time he was terribly critical of the established mullahism and all this clerical, ecclesiastical fundamentalism and so on, if I may say so. And he says, वसत अफलाक में तकबीर मुसलसल एक मजहब मुल्ला और नबातात और जमादात. He says one is the great God's creativity throughout ages, and the other is the religion of the mullah and of the vegetable and of the fossils. So he is putting all those mullahs with the fossils. So he is very relevant today. Plus the civilization of today, he is very critical of the Western civilization as well. So there is great relevance with today's happenings.
Dr. Durrani, Dr. Ahmed, thank you very much for talking to us. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.